Now we're going to learn about listing items from Firebase. Listing items is one of the most common tasks we're going to be performing on our database. So to get started, let's create a service, and I'm going to name it user service now. Here again, we're going to create a class. And then we're going to export a single instance of it. Export const. In this course, we're going to be using observables. So I'm going to import from RxFire. They give us two options to retrieve data, to list data. One of them is collection. And the collection will return you a lot of information about the collection, like length, amongst other things, including the data. But you also can get the collection data, and the collection data will return you the ID and the document data, nothing regarding the state of the collection. So if you want to get more information about the collection, you would use the collection method, and to get the data, only the data, you use the collection data. So here I'm gonna create a function called getUsers. So now to use, you can just return that function, collection data, and this function takes a Firebase query. It's a reference to our Firebase collection we want to use. So in our case, it will be Firestore. And this one we need to import from our Firebase file over here, this variable. And here we can call collection in it and pass the name of the collection, which is users. And if you just want to get the data and you don't want the ID of the documents, you can just leave it like this. But because the ID is quite important, for example, if you want to create a link, we would need that ID. So we can just pass the ID field over here, like that. And then it will merge the document data with the ID. So now that we get our function ready, we can subscribe to the data from our component. So now I'm going to create two components. One is going to be a page, which is going to be our users list page. And I'm going to create a user list component that we're just going to hold it together, the list, so we could reuse that component somewhere else if we need. So I'm going to use the stencil tools to create a new component. And the first one is going to be the user list page, and then I'm going to create a component user list. So this one is just a page which you're going to have a URL for it, and this one is we're going to insert into a component like this one. So let's create the route for our users. In our app.ts, I'm just gonna replace this auth here with a users page, and I'm going to change the component to user list. Now let's add this a link so we can have a quick access to it. Here in the app menu, we can just create another link over here. Just need a comma over there. And we're going to target the users. So users. And this is just a person head icon. Now let's run our server and see if that route is working. npm start. So here we have our home component. and our user list. It's taking us to the user list component. Now let's continue, and we're going to create our list, and that will be inside our user list here. Just a dummy component. Now this list will only display the data, so we need to pass the data from our parent component. So we're gonna do that with the property from Stencil. Here we need to import the prop from Stencil core, and this is gonna hold a user array, which is a list of users. So this is type information, and we're importing it from our interface here. Now here we're gonna return if there is a users, we can return something, otherwise it's gonna be undefined, and then this is not gonna show anything. Now here we can map those users into some components. It's going to be kind of a list, so we're going to use the ion item. So this .users.map, and here for each user, remember here is not a JavaScript function, it's JSX, so we need to do parentheses because we are dealing with JSX here. So now inside we're going to return a series of ion items, which will have all the information we need. So an ion avatar, which will take an image, and here on the source is going to be user.photoURL, and here the user display name. Now this is one of the benefits of using the type, is that we can just do a dot and it will autocomplete for you like that. If you were to use any here, which any could be any value, you won't have any autocompletion. So now we use a label. So inside I'm gonna use the user display name, and I'm gonna also add a paragraph to show the UID. So we want to display a list of users, and when someone clicks on one of these items, we want to navigate them to the user profile, to this user's profile. So we're gonna use an onClick method, which we're going to create now. So in here we do an anonymous function, and we call, let's say, a view function. But we're gonna need to pass the UID because we need this UID to navigate the user to the profile. Let's create that view function then. So view, we take the UID, which is a string. So I'm gonna create a variable to host the router, and here we do document.query selector, and we pass the element we want to grab. So I'm gonna do the ion router, and now we can just return the router.push. The router.push expects a URL path, so we're gonna use string interpolation to pass that UID. So whenever someone clicks on an ion item, we're gonna push this route to the stack. Now to use this component, we're gonna insert the user list into our page list here. And the reason we're doing like this with a component to hold the data and the other one to insert is that you might want to do like a search page, which we can reuse this component. We just need to pass the search user array to it, the results, and then we can just display the data if you're dealing with user in this case. So here for the return, I'm going to use an array, and we're gonna call the navbar. And the title will be user list. Here got imported automatically, so we don't need to do that. And now we can use wrap it into Ion content, so you can get some nice scrolling from the Ionic. And here we can just call Ion list. And remember, this Ion list, we're asking for a property called users. So here we just need to add users will be equal to, say, this.users. And then we receive that. So now we need to create these users and pull the data and save to it. So here we will add a state, and we import it from Ionic's stencil core. Sorry. So users, and it will be a user from import from our interface and a user array. Just like that. Now we just need to grab the information from our service with this getUser function and link to this data, which you then pass to this component, and this component will receive as a prop and display it. So let's use the component will load lifecycle. We will talk more about component lifecycles in the future. But the component will load will do whatever you put inside, it will do before it renders the components. We do component will load, and inside you can get the user service, which you get imported here, and then we can use that function, get users. Now, this is an observable, so we need to subscribe to it. So here we get the data, and we can just do this.users equals data. Now here's complaining about that we're trying to assign users array to an array of unknown objects here. To fix this, we just need to go to our user service, and here we're just asking for a collection. But because we're just passing the reference, we're not telling this function what kind of data we're expecting. It's returning like a observable of an object, an array of object. So if you just pass the user here, it will know that we are expecting that user. So here you have the observable. This is what is gonna return. And we can add in here so we can see it easier. So now we just need to import the observable from RxJS. And now our error should be gone from this page. As you can see, this getUser is going to return the observable, and we're going to link to this our internal state here. Now let's spin off our server, which is running, and we're going to take a look. File load. Let me open the DevTools. Here we have one object. I'll just need to save it. I forgot to save it. And here is our data. This console login here is from the app, so I'm just going to remove it. Here on the app, we are getting the current user. So I'm just going to delete that so it doesn't interfere with our data. So here we have our two users. If you go to the console and here on the database, we have two entries in there, so we're successfully displayed. Let's fix this avatar gap over here. If you go to the user list component, we can just add margin to it. So inside, I'm just gonna paste this one, avatar, and we're gonna add a 16 pixel margin on the right side. And that will give some gap over here. Now let's console log the data we're getting back from the server. And we can do that with the some RxJS operators. Here on the user service, we can just add a pipe. Pipe will allow you to add additional commands to this observable, so we can do them in order. So let's start with a tab, and this one will allow you to take a look inside of your observable and do stuff like console log the data. So here, let's just name it users. Now, if you take a look at your array, you have the ID over here. And this is what this function is giving us in here. If you don't pass the ID, you leave it out. Now we don't have the ID field anymore. There will be times that you just need the data and you won't care about the ID. But in our use case, because we are using a list of users and we need the ID for them to click and go to that ID, we should get the retrieve the ID as well with our users. So here we add again the ID and we get it over there. Now this collection of users, it's a bit different because we're already saving it as a UID over here. And that's because we're grabbing that from our authentication. But some collections, like for example, if you create a products collection, you don't need to save the ID because you can just retrieve like we did over here. Anyway, so now we have our function and we're retrieving the data. And when someone clicks on that user, it should take them to users and the ID. Now to load that page, we should create a router, and we're gonna do that in the next lesson. Now, just before we go, as you can see, we can load and list the user. But if you remember, in the beginning of this module, we create some rules. If you go to the Firestore rules, we create this rule that we can get one item, which would be for the profile. Anyone can do that, but to list, you need to be authenticated. To list is to get all the data like we are retrieving over here, like 2 or more if you have any. Now it's fine, but that's because I'm authenticated. I have my user here. But if I open incognito window and here I won't be authenticated. So if I try to list, I'm gonna get a missing and insufficient permission. So our Firebase rule is working. If the user is not authenticated, he won't be able to see listing. You might want to use this or might not. For our use case, this is not really necessary, but that's just for us to learn. All right, so in the next lesson, we are going to create the user profile. Whenever someone hits the user item, it's going to navigate them to this person's profile. So I see you in the next lesson.